Um, I have been in a very isolating time. Earlier this year, in 2024, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And through a barrage of tests and doctors and waiting rooms, it's stage 4 breast cancer. Stage 4 meaning that it's not just in one spot, it's already spread to other spots in my body, in my case in my lymph nodes. Earlier this year, when all of this was even more fresh, it felt like myself and my spouse were kind of dumped into this fog of unknowns. Dumped into this fog of unknowns, and all of my plans for the year evaporated. I was gonna do a bunch of pop-up markets slinging my screen-printed kitchen towels. I was gonna expand my wholesale offerings. I was gonna finally be all in on my small creative business, finally believing that we live in a time and a place where I could screen print my kitchen towels and sell them, and it would be enough to support our little household of 3, 2 humans and 1 Charlie dog. But in this to support our household of 3, we're pretty frugal, and it's okay. I was telling myself, I know my story, and the lore audiences are the best audience in the city. Yeah, a very safe space.
Yes.
So even when you feel like all of your dreams have evaporated, you can feel safe in sharing that. All of those things kind of felt like they were really out the window, and I was in this fog of unknowns with all of these really heavy feelings and not really knowing what to do with all of these heavy feelings, just this darkness. It felt like everything in my world had stopped, like it was like a really massive creative block. And my spouse Ian, in all of his wisdom, said something like, hey, why don't you try just making some art to start processing how all of these feelings that are coming up. And I knew it was a good idea, but I also had all of these art graduate feelings and unhelpful beliefs, but art has to mean something. It has to be conceptual, and how can you expect me to make a masterpiece when I'm dealing with all of these really heavy emotions and everything feels dark? And then I remembered learning about artists who have been able to transform immense pain and illness into a creative resource. And then I remembered some sage words from my favorite nuclear medicine PET scan technician that I met earlier on in this process. She shared with me, she said, I know it feels like your entire world just totally blew up. And you can take this energy and turn it into something good. Let it be something good. So I was thinking about that, and I knew I needed something small to get me going again. Because part of those dreams that I felt were evaporating was a goal for this year of creating 24 new screen print designs. And so, but that was way too big of an idea when all of this other stuff was happening for me. I needed something much smaller to break inertia, to get back towards a creative practice, because I didn't want to be, binge watching TV, sitting at my desk, like feeling sorry for myself forever. It was okay for a little while. I mean, do what you gotta do. But I wanted to get through that. I didn't want to just be sitting ruminating on all of these feelings. But I needed something small. So I found an online class, a little course. It was a daily practice class, which means it had lots of little videos for each day of the month. And it was called Discovering Your Visual Vocabulary. And that seemed kind of like the speed that I was at, like ABCs. You can't get much more basic than that. I think I can handle this. So the teacher, shows out all the materials that we need, and I already have like absolutely everything I could possibly need for this class. It was paper-based, and so I already had my paper, I had markers, I had colored pencils, I had watercolor pencils, I had ink, I had brushes. You could stock a small art store with the number of supplies I have at home. And so I'm sitting at my desk and I start watching these short videos, and it's the teacher guiding us through these exercises. Draw lines on the paper, fill the paper with lines. Draw X's on the paper, fill the paper with X's. Draw lines and then different colored lines on top. You've made a plaid design, wonderful. Fill the pages with plaid. And I kept filling these pages, and I started getting a little stack, and it was through that kinetic motion of using my hands to do something that helped me break that inertia. And through filling these pages and pages with just these marks, just making these marks, had started to allow those really heavy emotions of grief towards my future, of the sadness, of the fear. It helped them start to work their way from being stuck, to work their way through my body and let some of that go. I am still processing lots of big emotions here months later, and it will continue. It's really a day by day, hour by hour kind of thing. But I loved this online class. And it didn't end with just making the paper. At the end of the class, the teacher guides us through cutting up this beautiful paper that we've just made into shapes, and then gluing it down in a different way. And now we are paper collage artists. And the teacher had a project that I followed, and then she really encouraged us to keep going, to find the shapes. This was all about, your own visual vocabulary. So to find the shapes that keep coming up for you. So I kept going, and the shape that kept coming up for me were these arcs. I just kept cutting out these arcs, these rainbows. And I would start with one arc, and then I'd cut out one slightly bigger, and then another one slightly smaller, and then I'd glue all those to each other, and then I glued those onto another piece of paper, and it was starting to getting all of these rainbows. And I called Ian up to, look at my pretties and give me like, good job, good job. And he says, those look like, kind of like magnets. And I was like, cool, because I had little caps on the ends of some of them. And then he said, rainbow magnets. And I was like, ooh, I like that. I like that idea. Not only of this like colorful object, but also the idea of something that could attract rainbows to us in this very dark time of feeling like it's just all dark clouds around us. Rainbow magnets. And then he says, and from here, that one kind of looks like a horseshoe. And I said, I thought that too. Maybe it's because we both felt we could use a little extra luck above our door in this time. And then he says, unicorn horseshoe. And I was like, yes. This completes the thought. Rainbow magnets are unicorn horseshoes. Nobody can argue with me because I don't think anybody has any evidence to the contrary. So rainbow magnets are unicorn horseshoes. That's a great idea. And I had an art show coming up, so I was like, well, these are what are going to be at that art show. And then the day after the opening, a new friend who had purchased one of my rainbow magnets sent me a photo, and it was of their living room from across the room. And above the fireplace, there was a big painting of like clouds and a landscape, and there were some other smaller pieces. I couldn't quite tell what they were from the photo, but I did very much recognize this tiny pop of color with all of these other artworks. And it was one of my rainbow magnets on her wall. And she said, "It makes me so happy." And, you know, that really hit me. That makes me happy too. So, oh, and my favorite way to make paper from this class ended up being not like all the colored pencils and everything, but it ended up being using colored paper and then just black ink and a brush to make these simple shapes on this paper. And after I did a few of those, I realized that is basically a screen print design right there. And so it was just small enough of a next step, more of a continuation of what I was doing. And I could imagine it happening, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make that screen print design. So I made a small screen print design, just big enough to print a piece of paper. And then I was back on track with my big project. I didn't know that taking this, mark making class would get me back there. I just knew I needed to be doing something. So I also had all of these rainbow magnets piling up in the house. I mean, they're filling drawers at this point. I am being overrun by these adorable little pops of color and pattern. And the art show came down, so then all of those rainbow magnets were coming home, and I want to keep making them, but I don't want to just have stacks of them everywhere. So I had an idea. I had the idea to share this story about the origin of rainbow magnets and to offer you, as listeners of this story, to offer you a gift of one of these mysteriously multiplying rainbow magnets, if you would like one.
Yeah.